Good morning, Algebra 1 students. At least it might be morning for me, maybe not for you. Hey, I'm so glad that you guys are watching these videos. I think that I hope that they're helping you. I know that sometimes the language that the book uses is quite a bit different than the language we might use in normal day life. Just try to get through the best and keep those videos handy, because the nice thing is it's like taking notes, only it's right there for you. Go back, watch it again. Oh, Mr. Granillo said something like this, but I don't quite remember. Rewind it. Go find it. Okay. So today we're going to continue to talk about graphing, but this next section we're going to slow it down a little bit, and we're going to talk about because let's just back up a little bit. So you remember that. Hold on one second. Okay, so remember we had, our basic graph y equals x squared, right? And that was just a regular parabola with a vertex at 0, 0 and an axis of symmetry at 0, 0. Then we put a number in there, right? And what was that? That was a vertical stretch by 3, right? And if there was a negative sign, we said that was a reflection. A reflection is the fancy word for flip. Then we added one more thing. We might have said 1/2 x squared and then minus 4. And what did that minus 4 do? It was a translation down 4. Okay. The 1/2 would have been a vertical shrink, made it wider. Okay, but that's what we've been doing so far. But if you notice, we've only been dealing with A and C, right? We've only moved things up and down. Our vertex, the x value of our vertex has stayed 0 this whole time. It might be 0, 0, it might be 0, -4, whatever, but the vertex and the axis of symmetry have stayed at 0. Well, today we're going to change that, and we're going to talk about some different types of equations, okay? So we're still using our same equation, ax squared plus bx plus c, but we haven't been dealing with b yet. We've only had things with A and C. But before we get into the actual equations, I want to take a look at some graphs and see if we can't find a couple things. So let me show this graph right here. Okay. So if that's the parabola that we're dealing with, you got to be able to find 3 or 4 things off of that. Okay. The first thing is, what's the vertex? And I know we've done this, but I just want to repeat it because we're going to do something else with it. Where's the vertex? You could pause the video right now, see if you could answer that. But the vertex is right here. Okay. That's the coordinates -2, 3. Okay. What's the axis of symmetry? Well, remember the axis of symmetry is this dotted line going right down through -2, an x value of -2. So that's our axis of symmetry. So remember, these two things have to be the same always, always, always. Okay, in case you missed that. Okay, number 3. This is something that's new. Okay, they're going to ask you, what is the maximum or minimum value? Okay, well, it's still asking you about the vertex. It's still talking about the vertex, but it's just saying what that value right there, that's a maximum because all the other points are below that. right? So this would be a maximum. We'd say there was a maximum at 3. Well, gosh, where does that come from? Well, that should be the same as that number, okay? Now, we're going to do one last thing, one last question. We're going to say, find the y-intercept. Well, we should know this from our graphing lines day. The y-intercept is simply the point that it crosses the y-axis. So it looks to me right here, that's the y-intercept. The y-intercept is at -1, or we'd say 0, -1. Okay, that's going to become important later. So we got to be able to find those 4 things. Okay, let's do a different problem and see if you can do that. All right, let's go way over here. Okay, let's at least find, I didn't draw it very well so that you could find the y-intercept, but let's answer those 3 questions again. What's the vertex? The axis of symmetry, and minimum or maximum value. Okay, so pause the video right here and go ahead and answer those 3 questions. Okay, your vertex should be right here. That is the point 4, 3. And then my axis of symmetry gets really easy because I just say it's the same as the x value of the vertex, x equals 4. And then my min or max should be straightforward because it's coming from my y value of my vertex, right? The min or max is 3, but now is it a minimum or is it a maximum? Well, it's at the bottom of the parabola, right? If it's at the bottom, it has to be a minimum. Whoops, that's not it. There you go. It has to be a minimum. If it was at the top of the parabola, it'd be a maximum. So you're going to have a couple of problems where you're going to be asked to find those things, okay? And then, of course, we could find the y-intercept. I just didn't do a very good job of, it probably would have continued up here at about 11 or so, but I didn't draw that part. So that's okay. You can handle that. All right. So that's the first type of thing. The second thing is we're going to find those same things again, but we're just going to do it not from a graph, but from an equation. All right. And this is where things get new. So we have an equation, f of x, the function of x, is equal to 2x squared plus 8x minus 1. Okay. Now, one thing, I'm going to start off with the easiest thing. Okay. Right here. That number is always the y-intercept. Okay. That you don't have to do any figuring. Just C is always the y-intercept. Okay. But now, how do we find the vertex? How do we find the axis of symmetry? How do we know if it's a min or max? Well, really the key to all of that is the vertex. Okay. Once you find the vertex, everything else is going to be pretty straightforward. And the nice thing is, remember how we had the quadratic formula when we were solving quadratics, negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a? Well, we have another little formula. It's much smaller, and it's also kind of familiar. The x value of the vertex can always be found with this little formula right here. Negative b over 2a. Just like we did with the quadratic formula, right? So this is a, and this is b, and the -1 is c, but we don't need that right now. So all we need to do is throw our 8 in for b and our 2 in for a and work that out, okay? And so what does that give us? That gives us -8 over 4, which is -2. So the x value of the vertex is -2. wow, that sure looks a lot like the axis of symmetry already, right? So that's good. So we have one last thing that we have to do. We have to find the y value, okay? Well, the y value, we did this once before, hopefully you'll remember, is what I get if I plug -2 back into that equation. It looks like this, okay? So I'm gonna take -2 and I'm gonna plug it in for x. Sorry, we ran into the graph there, but hopefully we'll make it work, okay? And so now we might need to slow it down a little bit, okay? So I'm gonna get, this again is finding my y value. So 2, what's -2 squared? And then over here I have 8 times -2, that's a -16 minus 1. So now I have 8 minus 16 minus 1, that's -9. Okay? So now I have a x value of -2 and I have a y value of -9. Okay? So now let's go back up here. Okay, let me erase all this for us so we have some room. Okay. So now let's go back and review what we do with those questions. So my vertex, I'm just going to put a v there, is -2, -9. My axis of symmetry, x equals -2. Okay. Now, here's where things get a little bit different. It's the minimum or maximum. A little harder. Okay. We know that -9 has got to be either the minimum or the maximum. But which is it? Is it the minimum or is it the maximum? Well, here's how you tell. You go back and you look at A. Okay? If A is positive, that means that your parabola is going to go like this. Okay? That's for a positive A. All right? If A is negative, it's going to look like this, right? And we should know this because that's a reflection, right? If A is negative, we're going to flip it, okay? So when A is positive and we get this graph here, then we're going to get a minimum value down here and we're going to get a maximum when it's here. So when A is positive, we're going to get a minimum. And when A is negative, we're going to get a maximum. So on this problem, because the 2 up here was a positive, right? We're talking about A. Since the 2 was a positive, we're going to say that we're going to have a minimum value of y equals -9, right? Oh, by the way, this also looks a lot like the range, okay? So let's see if we can do another problem where we put all that together, okay? All right. Let's maybe try one with a little negative action, shall we? All right. Let me change something real quick. Okay. So g of x is equal to -5x squared minus 10x minus 2. Okay. So the first thing we want to do is -b over 2a. Right? So -10, because remember that negative sign goes with the 10, over 2 times -5. Okay? So what do we get? 10 over -10 equals -1. So my x value is -1. Now, what do I do with that? Well, I got to plug it in back into this original equation here. Okay? Now, what's that give me? That gives me positive 1, because negative 1 squared is positive 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. This is a negative times a negative. That's a positive 10, and then minus 2. All right, so negative 5 plus 10, that's 5, minus 2 gives me a y value of 3. So now I know my vertex. My vertex is going to be at negative 1, 3. My axis of symmetry is going to be x equals negative 1, because those have to be the same. And then, is it a min or max? Well, right back up here, we have a negative sign, and so that's going to make it turn upside down. So we're going to have a maximum of y equals 3. Okay. We could also use that information to find the domain and range, right? The domain would be all real numbers. The range would be y is less than or equal to 3. How do I know it's less than or equal? Because it's a maximum. 3 is the max. It's the biggest number that is going to be on the graph. So the range has to be everything below that. Okay? And then the last thing, just to throw it in there, what's the y-intercept? Well, the y-intercept, if you recall, up here at negative 2. Okay, so we'd say, well, the y-intercept is negative 2. So lots of information thrown at you, but a lot of information that we can get from the graphs. Okay, so go back, go through the examples, pause them at your pace so that you can figure out what the heck you're doing. Okay. Again, some of you have emailed me with questions. That's great. Keep that up. And otherwise, we'll just get back at it again tomorrow. I'm going to give you an assignment that goes with this lesson, so be paying attention for that. And we'll just go one more step tomorrow. We'll see you guys then. Bye-bye.